What's a podcast? I like your show.
How did I get here? Welcome to the Shipe Sports Show.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Shipe Sports Talk Show. I am your host, as always, Matthew Shipe, joined always by my awesome co-host and producer, Paul.
Hey, how's it going, Matt?
Doing good. How are you doing?
Great.
Joined always by Chris Cordova.
What's going on, guys?
What's up? What's up? And always our last co-host, Anthony Ladicio. Anthony, how are you doing this evening?
Doing well. How you guys doing tonight, gentlemen?
Awesome.
Doing great. Doing great. Have a packed show for everyone today. We're going to start off with our weekly fantasy stardom sit-em segment. Followed by, we'll talk a little Redskins and that last second loss to the Lions, snapping their 4-game win streak. I'm sure Chris can agree that was a big heartbreak for the home team.
It was a very big heartbreak.
And then we're going to preview the World Series matchup starting tonight between the Cleveland Indians and the Chicago Cubs. What a big night in Cleveland. You got the Cleveland Cavaliers rings being handed out. You got the Cleveland Indians starting World Series. Big sports night for Cleveland. Did I just say that in a sentence?
Yeah.
You did.
And then you have the 0-7 Cleveland Browns. So take it as you want.
So what's going to happen? So this year, right, the Cavaliers are going to get their rings and the Cubs are going to win it, right? And then next year, the Browns are going to win it. I'm calling it right now.
What do you
You're
drink?
calling the Cleveland Browns winning the Super Bowl. Holy Hannah.
You
Uh-oh.
gotta find a quarterback first. And then we're gonna finish off with we're gonna review the national season. Talk about the highs, the lows, obviously of the exit early in the playoffs. So we'll get to that. Maybe what they need to do to add on to next season. So let's get right into it. Fantasy football, start 'em, sit 'em. As we start off with our quarterbacks. So Anthony, go ahead, just start 'em, sit 'em, and quarterbacks.
All right. The guy I'm going to go with as my stardom this week is a guy that it was a very crazy game, the Monday night game this past week with a 6-6. Sunday night game between the Cardinals and the Seahawks and a 6-6 tie. And I think Russell Wilson's going to have a huge bounce back game against the New Orleans defense, who has just been abysmal all season. I see that being a high-scoring game between the two of them. And then my sit-em this week, I know they're playing Cleveland, but I just don't think Ryan Fitzpatrick has the same, thing that he had last year going when they were 10-6. And I know he's going to be playing now, and he's basically getting a second chance since Geno Smith went down with a torn ACL. But I really don't buy that Fitzpatrick's going to go out there and do anything flashy on Sunday. So it's someone I would not play this Sunday either.
All right, Chris, on you.
This week, I'm going to go, unfortunately, it pains me to say, I'm going to go with Andy Dalton this week. He had a pretty good bounce back week this past week, and if Josh Norman, who's in concussion protocol right now, if he doesn't play, I mean, I can see A.J. Green and Andy Dalton taking advantage of that all day long. So that's who's going to be my stardom. For sit-em this week, I'm actually going to go with Phillip Rivers. We saw how dominant the Denver defense and Denver pass rush in particular can be. And they just played them 2 weeks ago, and Phillip Rivers did not look good against them. So even though he had a great week this week, it was against Atlanta, not Denver. So Denver's a whole different team. I would sit Phillip Rivers this week if you have a better option.
All right, so for this week, I'm going to go with stardom. I'm going to start with Marcus Mariota. A division game against
You think so?
against the Jags. Jags, their defense has been kind of shaky lately. Derek Carr had a good game, and Mariota the past 2 weeks really hasn't really been that bad. He's kept the turnovers down. Unfortunately, at the end of that last game, that one fumble, strip sack fumble. But other than that, the interceptions have been down week to week. So I really like Mariota. And my sit-em this week, can't believe I'm going to say this. Last week I said Antonio Brown, the top wide receiver in the most fantasy drafts. This week I'm going to go with the top fantasy quarterback in most drafts this year, and that's Cam Newton against the Cardinals. Cardinals defense last week, they shut down Russell Wilson, and I think even though they tied, I still feel like the Cardinals are riding some momentum. They tied the division leading Seahawks, so I'm going to say sip Cam Newton. I mean, they're 1-5 right now. I mean, until he can get a hot hand going, I feel like you can't start him unless you have another good, valuable option on your bench.
Mm-hmm.
So now let's go with running backs, and Chris, you can start us off.
Running backs. This week, I'm going to have to go with, I think, who probably will be the number 1 or number 2 overall running back this week is going to be Spencer Ware. I mean, Jamal Charles, they came out and said it. He's not healthy yet. He had a setback with his knee. It's got some inflammation.
And he had
So
like 0 points in some fantasy last
he
week
had one rush.
for
That
one
was
yard.
it. Exactly. So I mean, it's Spencer Ware's backfield right now. They're facing the Colts, which are the third worst running defense in the league. He's got the best matchup you can have, pretty much. So start Spencer Ware. To sit this week, I'm gonna go with Mark Ingram, and here's the reason why. He's had some pretty decent weeks these past couple weeks if you look at the fantasy numbers. But what bothers me is the fact that he's not getting the volume that we expected, especially around the goal line. For some reason, when they're in the 5 yard line, they put the hand. Well, I guess not for some reason when you have Drew Brees as your quarterback. Personally would probably trust Drew Brees over Mark Ingram. But if you have a big bruiser like Mark Ingram, you got to give him some shots in the goal to go situation. So right now, I would sit Mark Ingram if you have a better option.
All right. I guess I will go next on this one. And my starting running back this week, Ezekiel Elliott. We saw what Matt Jones and the Redskins running backs did against Philadelphia. Elliott, the top rusher in the league, I still believe so. Well, probably not since he's on the bye week, but I think he'll come back strong, get that number one spot back. And my sim this week, you took Phillip Rivers. I'm going with Melvin Gordon. I mean, he's had a good past back-to-back weeks, but like we said, going against Denver and that Denver defense, I don't like Melvin Gordon this game. So, Anthony, on to you.
Uh, I'm kind of scurrying here now for a new running back. I don't want to. I have Ezekiel Elliott too for the stardom. I agree
Yeah,
with very much what you said.
Yeah,
He's
he
just
leads
been a
the league in
star.
rushing. So
He leads the league in rushing. He's been a star in Philadelphia when Matt Jones, had a great game against them. While I'm looking for a stardom, I will say that my sit-him this week is actually Matt Jones, and as high as I've been on
yeah,
him all year, I just don't like the playing conditions that they have there when they go to London. You see a lot of these guys slipping. I
slipping.
mean, look at the game this past week. There was a 17-10 game, and the Giants had 4 turnovers and still only scored 17 points. I mean, in typical games, you get 4 turnovers, you're probably putting up another 3-4 touchdowns. You should be winning that game, relatively easily. And the Giants' one touchdown besides that rush to Jennings was an interception return that he had to make like a 40-yard play into a 90-yard play. So
Which
I
is an
think Matt
amazing
Jones, it was
play.
a great play, but I think Matt Jones is going to have a rough time, especially. He's going to want to bounce back with the fumbles. I don't think he'll fumble the ball. I just don't think he's going to have a 100-yard performance game there in London, especially against Cincinnati. And then for a starting running back, I'm going to go with DeMarco Murray since I had to pull one out here since I can't think anybody else without Elliott. DeMarco Murray, again, we've said time and time again, the Eagles had no idea what they were doing. They really just had no idea what they were doing, and he's showing that he's still one of the best in the league. And I think he's going to continue to prove it against a Jaguars defense that's been very hit and miss so far this year.
All right. Let's move on to wide receivers now. I'll start him off. Randall Cobb is going to start for me this week. Had a great game last week. You're facing against Atlanta. Not the best defenses in the world. All their games have been high scoring for the past couple weeks. So I'm going to go with Randall Cobb over Jordy Nelson actually in this game because I feel like Nelson's still trying to get back from that not playing last year. I think he's still a little shaky there. And then my sit-em this week, DeAndre Hopkins. Hasn't really produced this year in fantasy. He's been a dud. And, Brock Osweiler can't get it going. I think, they made a $72 million mistake with him. And I think, the Broncos are probably like, thank our lucky stars we didn't re-sign him. So I'm going to go sit DeAndre Hopkins, another another top 5 pick for wide receivers that is just being a dud. So, Anthony, your wide receivers. I bet you took one the way you reacted.
We have very similar ideas. I wasn't my number one choice, but my stardom this week, I have Mike Evans, a guy last week that had a huge game for Tampa, and I think he'll do pretty well again this Sunday against Oakland. And then for my sit-em, I have T.Y. Hilton. He had a huge game last week for the Colts, and I don't think that he'll do that same thing this week, especially the matchup against the Chiefs, who I think have one of the better defenses in the league. So I'm going to go with stardom Mike Evans and sit-em. I'm going to go with T.Y. Hilton.
All right, so for me, I'm gonna have to go for my stardom. Just kind of like I mentioned, my stardom quarterback. If Josh Norman is out, then our cornerbacks are going to be struggling this week, especially against AJ Green. He's an absolute monster. If you guys saw that right before halftime, that Hail Mary that he caught, he's a beast, and he's burned me plenty of times. Matt, you would know. So AJ Green is definitely going to have a big game this week
Andy
in
Dalton's the
London.
man.
To my situm, I'm gonna have to go with Deshaun Jackson. Him and Kirk Cousins for some reason are just not meshing well. I'm not sure if it's the timing. I'm not sure if Kirk Cousins is just more comfortable throwing to his tight ends and to Jameson Crowder, but he just can't connect with Deshaun Jackson. He had some chances. He's had good looks in the past couple weeks, especially against the Eagles. They were trying to get him going in that revenge game, but since then, his targets. He's only caught 50% of his targets in the past 3 games, and that's just not going to cut it. So I'm sitting Deshaun Jackson.
All right, now let's move on to our last position, tight ends. Anthony.
All right, for stardom, I'm going to go with Colby Fleener. I know that's a pretty bold pick, especially since they're playing the Seattle defense, but I think that Breeze is going to rely more and more with him to go to, his security blanket, especially in a game like this where it's going to be hard to get, points on Seattle. And then
Right.
for my situm, I'm going to go with his former teammate from Indianapolis. I'm going to go with Dwayne Allen. Dwayne Allen has not been producing. I think that Indianapolis might be
Well,
regretting the
he was
decision.
hurt last week.
Yeah, but even before that, this all year, he has not been producing. Doyle has emerged again. It reminds me a lot of what happened with Fleener there. Fleener was supposed to be the number one. He came in with luck because they went to school together. Dwayne Allen was getting more looks in the offense. Fleener left, and now it looks like that same thing's happening to Allen here. So I'm going to bench Allen, and regardless if it's Doyle, I don't like that matchup against Kansas City whatsoever. So.
All right, Chris.
For stardom, it looks like Jordan Reed has been cleared to practice. If he plays, I'm starting Jordan Reed. I mean, unfortunately for this health issues, I hope he gets better and I hope he gets on the field, but that is Kirk Cousins' best chance right now, moving the ball down the field. So if Jordan Reed plays, you got to start Jordan Reed. If not, I still would feel comfortable starting Vernon Davis this week as a probably a low end tight end one, just because of the fact that Kirk Cousins for some reason just likes to throw to his tight ends, and if we get down early, then we're going to have to throw the ball, and I think that's what we're going to have to do. End up probably doing 9 yard dump offs, 5 yard dump offs, to just try to get the ball moving. For a sit-em this week, I'm going to go with Jacob Tamme. He got off to a pretty good start this week for Atlanta. Atlanta being, I think, the best offense right now in the league, but Julio Jones is getting all the targets essentially, and Jacob Tamme had 1 catch this week. It was for a touchdown, but only getting 3 targets in the past 3 weeks each game is just not going to cut it. So I'm sitting Jacob Tamme.
All right. I'm gonna go with starting Gronk, obviously against Buffalo. I mean,
Can't go wrong with that.
ever since he came back, just putting up numbers. Sit him this week. Zach Miller of Chicago against Minnesota. Bennett, I guess, made the smart decision. Well, he got traded, but, lucky for him, he got traded. The QB situation now in Chicago is crazy. I think I heard somewhere Cutler came out and said, you basically have no choice but to start me now again.
It's true though.
So Zach Miller, I think any receiving type of player for Chicago you can't play, especially, Jeffries anymore. I mean, I think it's just hard to play anyone on that team right now.
Well, they have a tough matchup. I mean,
They do.
Vikings
Minnesota,
defense
yeah.
it's not something to mess with.
Nope. So that is our weekly sit-em, stardom fantasy segment. Like I said, if you have any more questions for any of us, you can message us on our Facebook page. You can tweet us, message us individually if you like. We're all on the Facebook page, so whatever you need, we're here for your fantasy needs, as always. And you'll always see me and Chris post our weekly lineups. And I think I was doing pretty good. I think Hearns crossed me this week. But in the Shipe Sports Talk DraftKings, I came in 5th place and won $9. So
Yeah, I saw that. You
I was in
just
top
made
5
it
through the
fifth.
whole week.
Yeah.
So pretty good week for me. So let's move on to let's spend a little time on the Redskins. Heartbreak. Can't blame this one on Cousins at all. You can surely put some blame on Matt Jones, I think. I believe, I don't know if Chris saw, but you can hear Jay Gruden mouth out, get him the F out of there at one point.
I didn't see that. No.
Yeah,
really?
It's when he fumbled, I think the second time on the 5 yard line, Gruden, you can see him mouth off to whoever's in the headset, get him the F out. And then maybe you can blame a little bit of karma on the special team coach taking a piss in the middle of the game in a cup. Anthony, did you see that?
No, I didn't.
There's a video going around where a Lions fan took a snap picture of the special team coach of the Redskins taking a piss on the sidelines in a Dixie cup near the Gatorade.
Jesus.
Hopefully, no one got that Gatorade cup.
They were wondering if he gave it to someone and said it was lemon flavor.
Oh, my God.
Man.
That's terrible.
Probably gave it to Matt Jones.
It.
So, heartbreaking loss. I think the real problem that final drive was they put no pressure on Matt Stafford. And all of us can agree here, if you give Stafford 5 to 7 seconds, even 3 seconds to throw the ball, he'll find someone open. And he was having 5 seconds on that final drive. And if you give him that amount of time, he has the power to put it right in the needle, to thread the needle. So, Chris, what were your thoughts on that final drive?
Yeah, I think that final drive, for some reason, I think there was two problems. The one scramble where he was able to kind of get them to, relative field goal range at that point. I mean, they were down by 4, I think, so didn't matter. But he was able to rush out of the pocket and pick up maybe 20 yards or 18 yards, whatever the case might have been. If you're only rushing 3 or 4 guys, you gotta make sure that you keep him in that pocket. You can't let him, especially if they're playing a deep, prevent or whatever the case might have been, where the cornerbacks are so far back. There's no way that they're going to be able to come up and stop him before he gets at least 15, 20 yards. So I think the defensive tackles and the ends got to realize that and keep him in that pocket and not let that huge gap get there so he can run through it. Secondly, that last play was for the touchdown. I really don't agree with only rushing 3 and dropping everyone else back. I think, like you said, we got to get him pressure because he's going to if you give him time, he's good enough to find the open receiver. And I think you got to pressure him, bring at least 4, maybe
Good
5.
old reliable Mr. Antoine Bolden.
Yeah, Anquan Bolden is, I mean, and one thing I read is Matt Stafford said, regardless of what the outcome was, whether they won, they lost, it was going to be on his shoulders. If he threw an interception in that play, that's fine. As long as they were going for that end zone, basically he said that he took it upon himself to make the plays, take the risks, and essentially they won. And that's the kind of attitude you want to have on a quarterback, especially your franchise quarterback. The game is on his shoulders. Regardless of the outcome, he's going to take responsibility. So, but I think we should have pressured him a lot more in that final series.
Yep. So we'll see what happens this week. They're playing the Bengals. It's going to be a tough game, and I feel like, being 4-3 now, I've realized, if you're 5-2, you can maybe afford to lose to the Bengals. I feel like you can't afford to lose this game because,
No.
the Cowboys have a really good chance of beating the Eagles. And the same can go with Anthony, do the Giants play this week or are they on a bye?
They're on a bye and
They're
they
bye.
come back
Okay,
and play
so-
the Eagles.
So I'm sure even if the Giants were playing this week, for the Cowboys if they win this week to go 6-1, the Redskins could sit at 4-4. The Eagles could drop down. I think what are they 4-3 now? They could drop down to 4-4. The Giants are 4-3. That's a hard, even though you're 6-1, you have half the season left. It's pretty hard to come back from that big of a deficit, especially with them being only losing one game and they're rolling right now. I mean, I feel like the Redskins, they have to.
Bless
This
you.
is almost a must-win to stay
Bless you.
in a game back. I mean, and Chris, what do you think about that?
I agree. I mean, it's going to be really tough. One thing I failed to mention was that Josh Norman pretty much kept Marvin Jones out of the game until that deep bomb that he caught, which essentially knocked him out of the game. But he was actually doing really well covering his receivers. But I think you're right. If we lose this game, I don't know. It's going to be a really tough mountain to climb to get out of this, especially within our division, and especially us playing each other so closely. Like, there's never a clear-cut winner in this division. And there's never a clear-cut favorite in this division. Everyone's always got a chance to win it. And if we go down 4-4, the way our schedule looks the rest of the season, it's going to be really, really tough hill to climb.
Yep. All right, so let's move on. Let's move on to the big thing that starts tonight, the World Series. We have Cleveland versus Chicago. Both teams that have not won a pennant. I think combined 100. I think it was 100.
140 plus years.
Yeah, 140 plus years. So we have good pitching matchup tonight. We have Lester, one of the best starting pitchers in all postseason play.
Yep.
People always talk about Bumgarner and him. Lester is posting up really great numbers. I think his ERA is below 1, and he's going against Kluber, whose ERA is .98. So this is gonna be a very good pitching duel. But for the Chicago, they have a much needed help in the hitting column, and Kyle, someone help me,
Schwarber.
comes back. I think he tore his ACL third game of the season. Now he's back. That's a big boost to that lineup. So, Anthony, we'll start with you. Who do you give the edge in this series?
Man, this is something I've been thinking about since the Cubs won this past, what was it, Friday, right? When they won the game, was it Friday night?
No,
Um,
Chicago.
Chicago won
Saturday
Saturday
night.
or Saturday night. Okay. So it's been really tough to really think about it because both of these teams are playing their best baseball at the right time. I mean, they both played really well throughout the year. The Cubs obviously the best team in baseball with over 100 wins. The Indians were the second best team in the AL, I think, for record. So both of them played really good. But I think if you look at it overall, I think the Cubs pitching staff is better than the Cleveland Indians. And I think the offense of the Cubs, getting Schwarber back at this point with the offense that was already that potent, I think just makes it even better. And with him being the DH, he doesn't have to be in the field, so he's able to get that rest, to where he can be, powerful in the lineup. So my edge is to the Cubs. I think the Cubs will. You want the prediction right now, or you just want?
You know what? Go ahead. Let's. You know what? Go ahead. Give your prediction. We'll go one by one.
I'm going to take the Cubs winning it. I don't think it's going to go the full 7 either. If you watch World Series, the past couple, most of them don't go 7. I feel like the World Series is some of the quickest series out of all the ones in the playoffs. I see the Cubs winning oh man, I want to say 5, but I'll go with 6 to be safe.
All right.
If the Cubs win tonight too, I think it's almost a guarantee they win the series because it's going to be really hard for I think the Indians have to win tonight since they have the home field advantage.
Right.
To lose one this early to the Cubs, especially with your best pitcher going, and it's their line. Like I said, I think their rotation down is going to be better than what they have. Remember, you still got Arrieta to go. Lackey hasn't been bad, so definitely something that they're gonna. I think that the Indians are going to struggle with against that rotation.
All right, Chris. Let's hear about yours.
Well, just one of the quick things that you were saying is I agree that the Cubs pitching staff and pitching rotation I think is just slightly better than the Indians, but the Indians in the last series were only hitting 168 against the Blue Jays. I mean, that's pretty bad. They did win it in 5 games, but I still think that that's not enough to beat the Chicago Cubs. But basically, the main reason that I think the Cubs will win the series, and I'm pulling up the picture right now, is because there was a guy who in the 1993 high school senior quote was, Chicago Cubs 2016 World Champions, you heard it here first. So a guy from California in 1993 predicted that the Cubs would win the series in 2016. What more evidence do you need?
No. Geez.
That is pretty fantastic, man.
And it's not Photoshop because a whole bunch of people from that school pulled out their yearbooks and verified that that was his senior quote.
So shall it be.
All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
say
you
we
have the
all-
Cubs. How many games?
And 6.
Okay.
I think the Indians they have some of the best closers right now. I think they've scored or they've held the opponent scoreless in 19
Miller's
innings.
ERA in 11.2 innings this postseason, 0.
Yeah, and he was the ALCS MVP for that exact reason.
So I mean, I think they'll be able to keep up, but I think the Cubs just have too much firepower.
All right. All right. I'm going to agree with you guys. I think the drought's finally over for Chicago, and this is what I think. Like we all said, pitching for Chicago is great. I'm going to read you off the batting averages for Cleveland real quick with people who's had more at-bats than they should. For Francisco Lindor, batting average in the postseason, 323. The next closest person after that, 269, and then after that, 222. So, I mean, they're not hitting. You got people like Mike Napoli, who is, an anchor to this offense during the regular season, batting 179. Carlos Santana, 172. So your top hitters aren't performing. When that happens, usually coincides with you not winning the series. Look at the Nationals. Bryce Harper didn't bat so well in the postseason. They're not there anymore. So I think it comes down to hitting. Obviously, you got Kluber going tonight. He's probably your best chance to get off 1-0.
Right.
They don't win tonight. You guys are saying what? You both said 6 games?
6.
Yeah.
Could be a sweep.
You think
If they,
sweep.
well, yeah, obviously,
they
I was gonna
win
say if
the
they
first
lose
2
tonight, they would.
If they win the first 2 games, Chicago, they're going to sweep them and win it in Chicago. It won't come back to Cleveland. They will win that series in Chicago for their fans. Now, Cleveland did try to bring a goat to the field for the curse. I don't think that's if Cleveland wins, we can say it was because of those guys for bringing the goat to the field. But other than that, I'm gonna go with Chicago, man. I just think that lineup with Rizzo's come alive now. You got probably the NL MVP, Chris Bryant. Lester, Arrieta, and when you get to the 8th or 9th inning and you're winning by 1 or 2, and Chapman comes in, it's ball game, game over. You're not gonna score on them. So that's we all picked the Cubs. I picked the sweep. Anthony and Chris picked in 6 games. So we'll see how it turns out for us. Who knows? We could be wrong, and LeBron James will use his power to get Cleveland another championship.
Which I still think is a strong possibility.
Yeah.
All right. So staying on baseball, we are now going to move to the Washington Nationals season in review. We're going to talk about the ups and downs of this season. Obviously, the down was they were eliminated in Game 5 NLDS. Once again, another one and done in the playoffs. So, but you did win a division title this year by a pretty good margin. So what has to happen for them now? Let's look what happened. Harper needs to have a rebound year. Obviously, this year he was not MVP type numbers. So you need a better thing from Harper, and I think you need a more consistent. Maybe Anthony and Chris can both agree. Shortstop and Danny Espinosa. He'll bring you the feeling, but his bat, it's just not there. Anthony, with playing against us, he has a great fielder, but he doesn't really hit that good in the division or anything.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Sorry.
I was gonna say, yeah, that's something like that. You said Espinoza was batting 209 this year, so I mean that's not something that's gonna really be something that's gonna help you guys. So.
And all the people that I'm seeing on the internet, bring back Desmond to play center field, put Trey Turner at short. Why would we bring back a guy who the year before couldn't hit anything either? I mean, I don't know why. I know he's a fan favorite, but you got to let Desmond go. He was a strikeout machine last year. This year, he started off hot, finished ice cold. We don't need that anymore. Pitching for the Nationals, great in the second half. Once we got Matt, I can't even say his last name now. Yeah, the closer we traded for from Pittsburgh. You got to re-sign him. He was basically, like what are they called?
Rentals.
Rentals, yeah, like Chapman is this year for Chicago. You got to re-sign him. And the catcher position, what do you do? We saw Chris can agree, Anthony. How big of a missing piece was during the postseason not having Ramos? How big do you think that was? Answers.
You asking me or who's going first?
Anthony, you go.
Okay. I think that Ramos, not only from a hitting standpoint in the field, I think just as a leader of that team, like you said, he was he's batting cleanup there, right, for most of the season, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep.
So, to not have that in your lineup and someone that's, like I said, a leader to that team, but you look at his numbers in the regular season, he was batting over 300. He had 22 home runs, 80 RBIs, and you're missing that, right, in the biggest, series. And another huge thing that I know we're talking about the batting, but you were missing probably, to me, behind Scherzer, and even when Scherzer's, this guy's healthy, he might be the ace of your staff, and Strasburg, that's a huge person to not be having in your your rotation. So as a Mets fan, it worries me to see that this team was this good without those guys. To know that they're going to only get better, and you have you're probably your best free agent signing and maybe your best hitter on your team that you signed away from the New York Mets in the offseason, and Daniel Murphy. I mean, he had a huge year. Everyone was like, "Oh, he did the the playoffs. That was a hoax. He's not gonna do that again. That was luck." The guy batted 347.
He could win the MVP.
He batted 347 at 25 home runs and 104 RBIs. You can call it whatever you want, and maybe he doesn't do this again next year. But he proved everyone wrong that said that playoff run was just.
And he did well in the playoffs. He was the best hitter in the playoffs.
Yeah.
I mean,
he had that one game where I think he had. What was it? He had like the 3 RBIs. All 3 runs were credited to him, and they won the game because of that. He had every single run that was batted in was off of his bat.
I'm gonna say this right now. After watching him the second half of the season, the playoffs, I've gotten a huge man crush on Trey Turner. That kid's
I
gonna
knew
be
you
a
were gonna
stud.
say that.
That kid's gonna he's gonna be
Yeah.
even as a Mets fan, you have to admit this kid could be a stud.
No, and that's what I'm
He was
saying as a
probably
Mets fan.
behind Murphy. He was their best player. He was playing
Yeah.
better than Bryce Harper.
That
Yeah, he
and that
was.
is the scariest thing of them all. Is you're saying these guys were playing better, and
Then
your
our
best
superstar.
hitter and the same thing on your pitching side, your best hitter and your best pitcher were not even really, to be honest, weren't really any factors to the equation of why the team did that this well this year. So if those guys can get into sync, I mean Harper was batting under 250.
Yep.
Harper can't be batting under 250. Didn't even have 25 home runs. Didn't have 100 RBIs. That's not a Harper year.
Well,
He
he-
won't
he
have a
still
year
had
like
a-
that again.
He still had a decent year. You
Yeah,
know,
but on
it's
Harper
not
standards.
exactly. He set the bar so high
The
last
MVP
year.
yeah.
Exactly. So I mean, he still had a decent year, but he didn't have MVP like numbers.
No,
So
I agree with you. Yeah.
he'll get back. I mean, he only what just turned like 24,
Mm.
25
Oh,
or
yeah.
something like that. I think maybe 25, something like that. He's still got
He's
a lot
young.
of
Yeah.
got a lot of miles left on him. He's only going to get better.
You know
He
how they
can't get.
sometimes they do those stats where if you come in halfway through the season, they calculate what you would have done if you were there the whole season.
Right.
They had Turner at 30 home runs, over 90 RBIs, 70 stolen bases, and a 340 average. That's
Yeah.
Good.
He was
That's
batting
pretty-
342. Yeah.
that's scary for a
Yeah.
23-year-old.
Yeah.
And I think like 20 triples. Like, whew.
Yeah.
So the Nationals. What? Oh,
I like-
and the camera zooms in.
I like how the
it's even
camera
better.
zooms in. Like, hey,
So-
what's going on?
I think that Turner.
I'm
I
back.
think it's probably easier to move Turner to shortstop back to his natural position and find a center fielder than to try to go out and find a shortstop. But it all depends what happens. My thing is, Michael Taylor, don't try to bring him back in center field. I think that experiment is done and over with. Ben Rivera, he could still be your center fielder next
Ben
year.
Revere.
Ben Rivera, I said Rivera, didn't I? Rivera, he could still be your center fielder next year if you want, and move Turner back to short. So many options, but the big question for you two guys is, and this is what I was looking at, is Ramos probably gone for next year till September, obviously. So you have Jose Lobaton, not the best hitter in the lineup, not the best fielder either as a catcher. There's the free agent up in Baltimore, Matt Wieters. If you're a Nationals, knowing that you could take one of their star players away, would you make that move to maybe try to bring Wieters to the nation capital, even if for 2 or 3 years until Ramos can maybe get healthy again? Or if you don't decide to side Ramos, do you bring someone like Wieters in, steal him away from Baltimore? Anthony, what do you think about that?
I think that you're going to have to shore up the position because, like you said, Ramos is not going to be there, and I don't think that at a position where he's been such a huge, bat to the offense that you can't afford to just plug and play somebody and be like, for the year we'll just go with this guy. These guys are on a win. They're going to have a team that can win now, so they're going to go out there and get somebody. I'm not sure. You might know, but Luke Roy, is he going to be a free agent as well?
Yes.
The one that was on the
They said
okay.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's
so
a
that's
beast.
another guy. That's a huge
Should've got
offensive
traded to
bat.
the Indians.
And they asked him about that. How do you feel? He said he has no regrets. I mean, obviously he's not going to say he regrets it, but I think that that's definitely eating him alive that he turned down the trade to the Indians and didn't get it. It would be in the World Series right now, at least with an opportunity to win. So I think that's another name that the Nationals will have on their list of catchers to look at if this does become a thing where they don't want to go with someone in-house. But I think Lucroy or Wieters obviously right away with no Ramos elevates that position to at least having something there. But I think Lucroy for offensive, I don't know, man. That's tough. Lucroy and Wieters both could make a impact there. So
And then, you look at the pitching side. I love Gio to death. He's done great for his years here, but I feel like you have to go out and maybe trade Gio away, maybe get, maybe some prospects or something, and find a left-handed pitcher because Gio, I feel like ever since that first year where he won the 20 wins, he's too inconsistent. He'll have 3 starts where, his ERA will be under 3, and then he'll have 7 in a row where it's just skyrockets to over 5. I mean, like the beginning of this year, his ERA was great, and then he had like a 2-month stretch, and his ERA went from like a 2-point-something all the way up to like a 5. So I feel like you need to go out and find yourself a good, solid left-hander. Bullpen. People will say, well, what about the bullpen? Look at Game 5. Before Game 5, they really didn't allow any runs in that bullpen. I think before that they maybe allowed one or two in the previous 4 games. So I mean, you really can't say anything about the bullpen. I think that's great. I think the guys, like we say in the playoffs, fatigue sets in every once in a while, especially when you're playing that many games in a row, high pressure situation. Like I said, they have to lock up the closer, specifically. And then I read an article today, Lopez, Rodrigo Lopez, the guy who came up from the minors this year, made some starts. They thought it was going to be Giolito, turned out to be Lopez. Could that be someone you can move into the bullpen, especially with his high velocity fastball? You remember with Chapman? Chapman was a starting pitcher who converted to a closer. So something like that. Anthony, from a Mets standpoint, do you think the Nationals should? What do you think they could do to improve their bullpen, or do you think the way they perform in the playoffs, except for that one game, are they fine the way they are?
I think there's always things you could do to, tinker here and there. And I think, like you said, the big thing is they have to lock up. I can't pronounce. I always have an issue.
Mackinnon?
Malik. Yeah, that's him. The guy from they traded for
Melanson.
the
There we go.
Melanson.
Chris doesn't even watch baseball.
What is
Thank you.
baseball? Is what I.
All right, Mr. Fantasy winner.
So I think that it's definitely something that they can look to shore up because, like you said, Papelbon was there. Obviously, he got cut, and they went without him. But that's been a position they've always had an issue with, at the closer because he hasn't been consistent. So you have to think that they're going to look to at least bring in one new person into the fold of things. You look at some of the guys that are going to be out there this year in relief. Right off the, I'm looking now at Joaquin Bennett's going to be out there, Neftali Feliz,
Chapman,
Greg Holland, Travis Wood, Brad Ziegler. These are guys that aren't in like the top of the. So these are guys they could put in there, as a setup guy to someone like the closer they have now. So there's something they could look at, or maybe they grab another starting pitcher and maybe they try moving Gio to the bullpen because of his his issues, something like that. But I definitely think they have to make at least 2 additions to that pitching staff. And what do you think? Do you think Tanner Roark is going to have this same kind of performance next year where he had, with the 16 wins this year?
Why doesn't he? The past.
Well, I'm asking you.
I think he does. I mean, last year they moved him to the pen, obviously, because they brought in Scherzer. Doug Fisher stayed in his spot. The year before that, he was a 15-game winner. This year, I think did he get to 16 this year, or is he just 15 again?
He had 16 wins. Yeah, 16.
I mean, so why can't he? I mean, it's 2 out of the last 3 years where he was a starter, 15-game winner. He's sometimes a sneaky pick for a Cy Young the way he pitches. So I don't see why you definitely don't keep him in that rotation. I think he's also the kind of guy who can grind out innings if you have to. If he can get high in the pitch count, he can still keep it going. So I mean, I think this national team, I still do believe their window could be closing the next 3 or 4 years or so. Obviously, because you don't know is Harper going to stay. Strasburg only.
You can't deny though, 2017. I can't say that we're going to be, a 100-win team, but you got to be excited. The way that we played these last couple of years.
You got to be excited. I'm sure Anthony, as a Mets fan, he's probably looking at it maybe from his point. I know don't want to get on his Mets. It's probably like, crap. We're going to have to see the same team that just, did it this year. I mean, Anthony, from a Mets standpoint, how do you feel about looking forward to 2017, seeing the Nationals to where, almost some of the key pieces are coming back and they can just improve? I mean, where do you see it from as a fan from a different team?
Yeah, no, and that's what I'm saying, and that's what worries me as a Mets fan, and just a baseball. Like I said, baseball fans in general should see this team as being someone that's going to be a powerful team. From my standpoint, especially with the Mets, they don't have really. They're going to lose a lot of players, so it's going to be hard enough. Like you said, the Nationals won the title this year pretty convincingly, the NL East title. It wasn't really close. I know it was over 10 games, I think, right, that they won by. I don't remember the exact number, but. It's going to be a team that's only going to get better because they don't really have, like you said, a lot. There's really not many impending free agents other than the closer, and obviously having Ramos hurt, is really going to be a big damper on them. But they're going to get healthy in the offseason. They're going to get a lot of these guys back, and I think that there's a lot of guys out there that they could end up bringing over there and having be inserted right into the team and helping out immediately. A team like the Mets, like I said, is going to lose their best player probably on their whole team. He's a free agent, and he's going to look for a big contract out there.
Is Cespedes a free agent this year?
Cespedes is a free agent because he signed that 3 year, $75 million with the option after the first. So they're saying he's going to opt out because he'll get one more big 6-year contract. So will the Mets be able to offer that? Is to be seen.
He may just go across the city to New York.
And I've heard that's what they're saying is the favorite, that the Yankees will get him, because they really haven't spent money in a while, and they're getting a lot of their big players off the books. Obviously, A-Rod, Teixeira, a lot of these guys are coming off the books. So that's something that the Mets have to worry about is the offense, or what offense they had. He's a free agent. Neil Walker's a free agent. I know Neil Walker got injured. Lucas Duda is again. And David Wright, another guy that are just you're not sure where these guys are going. You're not sure if David Wright really is going to play again with the spinal stenosis, and Duda all year was off and on. So, as a Mets fan, it worries me very much to see this team to continue to only get better. And the pitching staff of the Mets will be healthy, but if you don't have the offense, like I said, the pitching staff's only going to get you so far.
Are you still concerned with Harvey when he comes back? Are you a little worried that he may not come back? What he was, last year, or do you think he'll get the improvement again?
Listen, this is gonna shock you, but Harvey better be ready in spring training, because he has to realize now there's gonna be, if Bartolo Colon resigns, there's gonna be 6 guys that can be starters, because Wheeler will be back healthy. He was supposed to come back in July, August. They ended up just keeping him out. DeGrom will come back healthy. Syndergaard, Matz. Then a lot of these guys at the end of the year too, like we were talking about, some of these rookies they brought up, they're going to be in there in spring training. So Harvey better be smart, because he might be on the outside looking in the rotation. Obviously, I don't think he'll miss out on the rotation, but if they're not, I don't see why the Mets don't try and trade him and get one of these position players they're going to be short on in free agency.
Well,
why not get rid of
Harvey? Here's my next question for you then with Harvey. Could you see him move into a setup closer role, especially if you don't think so? Not at all?
No. He won't.
Do you see him?
He's still young.
Okay, so you see him, if they would ask him, he'd probably be like, just trade me?
No, I think the Mets will trade him. The Mets are going to realize that that's what I'm saying. The Mets had this window from a year prior when they weren't to this past, last year when they played the Royals, this year, and then one more year. But these guys are going to start getting up on contracts. The Mets can't afford the guys they have now. If you think they're going to be able to hand out $20 million season contracts to all 5 of these guys, I mean, they're not. So if they realize Harvey's not going to be the guy that they want to keep, maybe they think about moving him. Get a young outfielder. Get someone that you can insert out there. Because Granderson next year, he's on the team one more year, then he's gone too. So eventually you got to get a star somewhere. So if you can't keep Cespedes, why not move Harvey and get a player back?
All right.
That's the way I look at it.
All right. Well, everyone, that was our Nationals, and I guess we'd say Mets season in review. Hopefully maybe by next week, the World Series I think could be wrapped up if the Cubs get a sweep. So we'll know that probably maybe next Tuesday or not what's going to happen. And then once the World Series done, just waiting for free agency to come in. Before we head out real quick, I probably should have told Paul one more segment. Now he's got to go write it in real quick. Sorry about that, Paul.
Oh, that's cool. Don't worry. Go ahead.
Wouldn't be right without saying Maryland. I know Michigan State, they haven't been good this year, but I feel like even though they're still a bad team, that's a pretty good win over Michigan State. Maryland had improved their record, I believe, to 5-2.
Yeah.
So really great win for Maryland. I know coming up you're going to have Michigan, Nebraska, Ohio State. It's going to be kind of hard. But then you also have Indiana and Rutgers. So this Maryland team has a really good chance of making a bowl game. And we predicted at the beginning of the year, maybe 4 or 5 wins, both of us maybe?
I thought we were going to make a bowl game. I thought we were going to make at least 6, get to 6.
But the big thing this past weekend was on Sunday, they had a 3-star recruit from Georgia, wide receiver, commit to Maryland. He's like 6'3". He's pretty, they said pretty athletic guy. Maryland has now jumped up from 17th to 13th in class rankings for 2017. I think the best class Maryland's ever had, as long as all these guys stay committed. And I think the way they're seeing Durkins running this team, Maryland could be kind of special in the next couple of years in the Big Ten. So, Maryland, great win for them. Tough loss for Ohio State. Penn State pulled off the upset, blocked the field goal with 4 minutes left, ran it back for a touchdown. Defense held on. So, I'm pretty sure we were all hoping. I was hoping for a Michigan-Ohio State, 2 undefeated teams battled out, last game of the season. But now Ohio State has to win that game to still be considered, for the college football playoffs. So Ohio State, you don't beat Michigan, you can almost kiss your chances goodbye of making the playoffs. Alabama rolled once again over number 6 Texas A&M, not even a challenge. Houston lost again. A team that I predicted to be in the college football playoffs, so throw that out the window now.
That's it,
Where's
yeah.
that piece of paper? Huh?
That's it for them, yeah.
Louisville rolling again, so pretty good exciting football games this week lined up. I'm looking at it right now. If we got any, I'm sure we got some top 25 matchups. We got Washington, number 4 Washington against Utah. Utah 7-1, Washington 7-0. That should be a big game this week. We have Nebraska versus Wisconsin. Nebraska, huh?
I just don't understand how they do these standings. Wisconsin's 11. They already have 2 losses. Like how are they even in there? And there's teams that are still undefeated that are, you know what I mean, that are lower than them.
Yeah, well,
I understand like they play tougher schedules, but still, man, 5-2 and they're number 11.
That's how they do. You also have Florida State versus Clemson. We'll see how that works out. But I think the 2 surprise teams this year, and Anthony, Chris, I don't know how much you've been watching college football. West Virginia, Baylor. They're both undefeated right now, both in the top 10 somehow.
Washington too.
Washington too. So
I did not buy. That's the last time I would have picked undefeated.
Yeah, Washington's rolling too over those Pac-10 teams. They're not even putting up challenges against them. So here's the thing for West Virginia, Baylor. If things add up right, they both play the final game against each other. They could not only be playing for the conference championship, but also possibly a berth in the playoffs. So hopefully, I would really like for those 2 teams to stay undefeated, just so that matchup will actually mean something more for both teams rather than just one being undefeated and they have to win to get in. So
that Ohio State loss benefits all 3 of those teams.
Oh yeah, definitely
Greatly.
Big time.
So, and if another one loses in that, those top, if Michigan ends up maybe losing, I know Michigan State hasn't really been that good, but this is a rivalry game, so anything could happen.
Virginia Tech 5-2 back in the top 25, and Penn State making the first time since 2011 they are back in the top 25. So that's awesome for Penn State. And you know what, Anthony? Now that you talked about those 5-2 teams, that are 5-2 and still in the top 25, Houston 6-2. They dropped all the way out of the AP. That's crazy. That was right.
That's what I'm saying.
Because they're not a power conference team. So, I think that's gonna do it for us. So, Paul, it's all you, buddy.
Thanks, Matt. All right, guys. So what we need you to do, if you're watching on the stream on Facebook or on YouTube, go ahead and like us, follow us, and share us out to your best friends, your family, your kids, whatever it's going to be. We would love to hear from you, so you'd be able to message us on Facebook /Shipe Sports Talk, on Twitter @ShipeSportsTalk, and you can email us at shipesportstalk@gmail.com. And you see the Twitter handles for Matt and Anthony on the screen, so feel free to give them a tweet, send them a tweet.
Get a tweet, Chris. Get a Twitter.
Get a tweet.
We're going to have to set up Chris with a Twitter.
I'm just going to make him one.
Yeah, just make me one.
At Chris something. I don't know. Yep, so that's all I got. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Be sure to share us out. That'd be great. We'd much appreciate it for sure.
All right. Once again, everyone, thank you for watching. We'll be back next Tuesday, 7 p.m. to discuss maybe the World Series, maybe reviewing the World Series if it happens. We'll talk some more football, fantasy, and also next week we're going to go halfway through the NFL season, take a look around, who's doing what, who's doing good, and look at our predictions to see
recap our predictions,
how close we are right now. And then also, as always, on Monday, 7 p.m., you can watch me and Anthony on the OT3 podcast, our wrestling podcast. We're having a very special Halloween episode this week. So thank you for watching. As always, for myself, Paul, Anthony, and Chris.
I know we were just on. Sorry, before you leave, we were just on the topic of college football, man. And I'm actually I think I'm gonna watch a game this weekend, and that's gonna be Northwestern against Ohio State. And the reason I'm gonna watch it, Solomon Volt, man, he's been putting up numbers.
He scored a touchdown last week.
He scored a touchdown
Anthony,
last week.
Solomon Volt is not only is he Chris's neighbor,
yep,
but he also went to our high school, and me and Chris can remember.
Holy crap, that's awesome.
We used to play.
We were playing
we used to play football
right there
with
in
that kid back when we were in middle school, and this kid was in fourth grade. He was burning us. This kid was a stud.
He
even when
had the
fell in
moves
school.
back then. He had the
was a stud.
moves. So shout out to Solomon Vault, man. Do your thing. I hope you score a touchdown against the Buckeyes this weekend.
Yep. So, Chris, that was a great shutout. Thanks for that, buddy.
Yeah.
So, Solomon Vault, good luck this week against Ohio State. So now, for myself, Chris, Anthony, and Paul, enjoy the World Series and enjoy the start of the NBA season. Hashtag DC Rising for the Washington Wizards. And go Capitals as well.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
we haven't talked about the Capitals very much. We got to get on that.
Yeah, I talked to one of our former guests, see if he can get on to talk about hockey.
Have a good night, everybody.
I'll put up the
All right,
music.
good night, man.
Are we still going? Are we done yet?
No, we're good.
Done. Good night.
See you
I'm
guys.
back. Good night, everybody.